Good afternoon, everybody. DJ Styles. Let's talk about something here. Now, over the winter months, I can't really make a casting with a mold. And what happens to a mold is it gets very dry. Um, the problem is when a mold gets too dry, you could end up with air bubbles in your mask. It'll bubble up inside. The air will come out of the mold, and you want to definitely try to avoid that. And the way to avoid that is right here is a bottle of distilled water, half and half mixed with ammonia. And what I do is I spray the inside of this mold. This has been sitting for, since October. So I spray the inside of this mold real good. Now, I'm not going to cast anything in this. This was just a test mold for me. But I put plenty of liquid in there, and I let that stone absorb that moisture. Now, what that also does is over time, you only get so many castings out of a mold depending on how much detail is in a sculpture that you mold. The more cuts and sharp edges, the more the stone will break down every time you cast a mask in it. So every pull, you usually get about 20 pulls out of a stone mold, and then you'll have to recast your master. Definitely have to make a master of your sculpture. Your first casting should actually be for a master. This way it captures all the detail. So what you want to do is, like I said, this is just to avoid bubbles. What I'm showing you right now is just by spraying a little bit of that ammonia half and half with water. I put a little more ammonia than I do water, but I want to make sure that water gets into that stone before I cast my latex in there. I wanted to let it sit for a few minutes before I put. If I was going to put latex in there right now, I would wait about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I would put the latex in. I don't want it soaking wet to where it's shiny on the inside. I want it damp. When it dries to where you can see the discoloration, but yet the mold is still damp, then you put your latex. You pour your latex into the hole, fill it all the way up to the very top, and you want to let it sit for about an hour to 2 hours, depending on the humidity outside. All right, and that's called dwelling a mask. And then you let it dwell inside the mold for about an hour to 2 hours, and then pour the remainder back into your latex bucket. And what's left is a thin skin of latex around the inside of the mold. And after about 2 days, you don't want to touch this. You want to leave that thin skin inside that mold, and as it cures, it'll pull away naturally. And then what you do when you go to finally pull it out after 2 days of waiting is you throw a little bit of, I use cornstarch, throw it on the inside, because when you go to pull that mask out of there, that latex can stick to itself and it'll ruin the mask. So you want to definitely throw a little cornstarch on the inside of that after it is cured for about 2 days. And then you can pull your mask out of the mold. And there you go. That's how you avoid bubbles in a stone mold. And believe me, I had to ask my favorite guy I go to, Alan Hops, and he's the one that actually told me about it. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Always ask, because like I said, I'm new at this business too, so I'm learning as I go. And I'm falling on the backs of guys that have been doing this for years. So every little bit of knowledge helps. And I'll tell you, Yeah, this mold here. I made this back in October just to test the size. What I did was I wasn't finished the sculpture, and I knew that. So what I did was I got the shape of the head roughly about where I wanted it to be, and then I put the latex in there, dwelled it for 2 days, poured the remainder. Well, I poured the remainder out of the. I didn't dwell it for 2 days. I put the latex in the hole, filled it up to the top, let it sit in there for about 2 hours, poured the remaining latex out. Then I let it sit for 2 days, and then I put the the talcum powder in there, and actually I used what do you call it? Cornstarch. Cornstarch. Pulled the mask out of there and let it shrink up. The key was I wanted to shrink that mask to see how big that mask was going to be and make sure that it was actually going to fit properly, and it turned out perfect. So I had the size exactly right. When I did make this mold, I did damage the sculpture just a little bit. Always do when you're pulling the mold off. But that's why this mold was made in 2 pieces. There's actually a seam line. You see it right down the center here? See it there? That goes right up behind the ears on both sides. But that's your seam line. And I actually cemented this thing together before I actually poured a mold, before I poured a latex mask in it. So with that being said, you know, that's it. That's basically everything in a nutshell. So if you do have any problems with air bubbles in your mask, especially as the summer months come in, because it starts to get more humid and can dry out your mold very quick, you do have to keep that mold moist, but not too moist. You don't want it too moist. Now I could probably, with that spray in there, I could probably get 2 or maybe 2 pulls. I'll get 2 masks out of that before I have to spray and wet that down again. But that's if I was casting in this. This is no longer going to be used, this mold. This goes to the garbage because it was used for a different purpose. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful day, and I will catch you on the next vid. Peace.